Welcome to Sacred Stories, a sacred space where divine voices are shared. I am your host, Reverend Patricia Caginello, and I am happy you are here. I encourage you to subscribe to our Sacred Stories podcast on iTunes or from our website, sacredstoriesmedia.com. This podcast is one of many exciting shows on our shared stream. So subscribe to our Sacred Stories podcast and enjoy a variety of shows having important and conscious conversations, ranging from the 12 steps to strength-based recovery, healing sexual trauma, forgiveness, conscious business, and so much more. So Sacred Stories on iTunes and sacredstoriesmedia.com. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Robert Atkinson, Ph.D., an internationally acknowledged authority in helping people tell their life stories. Robert is the author of 9 books, including The Story of Our Time, From Duality to Interconnectedness to Oneness, called a must-read by the widest of global audiences by Michael Bernard Beckwith, and the most recent bestseller from Sacred Stories Publishing. So it is my pleasure to say welcome, Robert Atkinson, to Sacred Stories.
Thank you, Patricia. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, I'm excited for our conversation, not only because I admire the work that you do, and the work with storytelling. That was one of our first connections, is that we are both storytellers to a great degree, but also the work that you have done with your book, The Story of Our Time. Much needed, important work in today's world.
Thank you.
So before we dig into the story of our time, let's find out a little bit more about who Robert Atkinson is. How would you answer that question?
Yeah, that's one that I could go many different directions with. But I like to, kind of in keeping with the approach of the book, I would like to just say that I'm a soul on an eternal journey from the Creator to this temporal realm designed for soul making, who will return to the Creator. That's what I think of as my lasting, changeless, unified identity. And there's lots of other things I could add to that too, but the changeless identity is the one that's most important to me.
A soul on an eternal journey. You said the changeless identity. Talk about that a little bit more. What do you mean when you say the changeless identity?
Well, when I put the focus on the soul, that part of me that is from God and will return to God, that's the eternal, changeless part. And all the other parts of who I am, I mean, we all carry multiple identities with us. Some develop over time, some we're born with, but we have those multiple identities that we carry with us all the time, and most of them are what I would think of as temporal identities. They can change as things around us change, and so on. But the one identity that doesn't change is who we are as an eternal soul. Even though we're brought here to this earth as a soul to go through a lifelong process of soul making to prepare us for our return to the Creator, the soul itself is confronted with many different kinds of experiences in this life that, and most of them are experiences of opposing forces or the realm of opposites, and our purpose really is to create a unity between those and among those dualities that we live in. And in the process of doing that, our body, mind, and soul become closer together as one entity. And that's kind of the process that I think occurs as we all go through our journey in this life, is that those three parts of us, the body, mind, and soul, become closer to each other until hopefully finally towards the end of our life they are one, and then the soul continues on to the rest of its eternal journey.
I love how you explain that. And as you're explaining it, I was thinking it sounds like our sacred story, right? It sounds like the sacred story of who we are. How would you share your sacred story, or what aspect of your sacred story would you like to share with our audience today?
Yeah, that's a really important one. And again, we can tell our life story on many levels, and I think the most important level to tell it on is that sacred level. So I think of my sacred story as kind of beginning in a pre-conscious way when my grandmother came to live with us for part of the year when I was about 9 years old, and I would interact with her, and other times I would observe her in her daily practice. She had a spiritual practice that was intriguing to me as a 9-year-old without even understanding it, knowing what it was or what it meant or why. But I was drawn often to her particular time of day when she would retreat to her room and read the Bible in the upper room. And that just fascinated me as a 9-year-old, and without being consciously aware of it at that time, that influence kind of grew in me and through me until I began to realize my own consciousness in my college years, pretty much when I majored in philosophy, and then right after college, I got a master's degree after that in American folk culture, and that led me in a direction where in my mid-20s I met Joseph Campbell, who was part of a series of adventures at that time in my life. And when I met him, it was a time when I was experiencing a whole series of new kinds of things in my life, and including, and I mean, this was around, just to give you the context, this was around 1969, 1970, and that ended up being a period when I wrote my memoir about. But meeting Joseph Campbell at that time was another piece to that story, and how it became really conscious to me the journey that I was living at that time. So I was in a bookstore in 8th Street in Greenwich Village, reading a book that I had seen in the window that drew me in. I was reading that book, and as I was reading it, I looked up at the bulletin board in front of me, and I noticed a poster announcing a talk by Joseph Campbell, whose book I was reading. That the talk was that night, just a few blocks away, and I looked at my watch and realized I had a few minutes just to get over there. So I, without thinking or questioning the intent, I got the book, walked over to Cooper Union, sat down in the Great Hall, and started listening to Joseph Campbell. And it was just amazing how what he was describing was what I was experiencing in my own life at that time. And so we met afterwards, and this was in 1970, and so he kind of took me, after I explained to him how much what he said meant to me and how much it was part of my own experience, he kind of took me under his wing and invited me to his home. And so in one of my visits to his home in Greenwich Village, he gave me a copy of the final volume in a series that he had written called The Masks of God, Creative Mythology. It was the 4th volume. And in that, he wrote a preface that part of which was that the series confirmed for him a thought I have long and faithfully entertained of the unity of the human race, not only in its biology, but also in its spiritual history, which has everywhere unfolded in the manner of a single symphony, with its themes irresistibly advancing to some kind of mighty climax. And again, without totally realizing the impact or the meaning of that thought at that time, that particular thought of the unity of the human race kind of grew within me and came out in a form that really became the center of my worldview as well. And then that, over the years since my early mid-20s, that got fleshed out and added to in many ways, and eventually some 50 years later almost came out as this book, The Story of Our Time, which is about how we're living in a time of transformation of consciousness that's going on that is leading us all to that consciousness of oneness.
So, Bob, thank you for sharing your story. And what strikes me in your story so much is the interconnectedness, right? The interconnectedness with you and your grandmother, the interconnectedness with you and Joseph Campbell, the impact that we all have on each other that many of us are probably unaware of most of the time. Would you agree?
Yeah, sure. It takes something. I'm not sure if I can put my finger on it exactly, but it does take something for us to become consciously aware of all of the influences and impact and the way that things that we experience every day of our lives, the way they're impacting us. And as I indicated, they didn't come out immediately. It took me many years for their full meaning to become fully conscious in my life, and I think that may be the way it works for a lot of people. Some people may have a more immediate conscious sense of the power and the impact of something they're experiencing in the moment. But for me, up to my mid-20s anyway, it took a while for it to become a conscious factor.
So your book, The Story of Our Time, From Duality to Interconnectedness to Oneness. Speak about even just the subtitle of the book, because we can point to the interconnectedness of us as humans, right? We just saw that, right, with your grandmother and with Joseph Campbell as two examples. But speak to the subtitle, From Duality to Interconnectedness to Oneness, what that means, your intent of that statement.
Yeah, I mean, both the title and the subtitle have kind of multiple meanings, can have, depending on how we see that. But the subtitle, I think, has multiple meanings as well. And one of those would be that it's a very brief description of humanity's conscious evolution from its beginning to the present time. And also the subtitle can mean the process that each of us individually goes through in our own life experience and our own personal collective evolution as we develop as individuals. So it's all about, but both of those ways it can be understood are about stages that we go through individually and collectively. And I kind of think of just on an individual level, it's one of the things that I describe a bit in the book is the pattern of collective evolution. And so if we go way back to the beginning of humanity's existence, there was a time then when indigenous and tribal groups lived with a consciousness of oneness. But as groups spread out and began to populate the world, other groups came in contact with each other, and that created conflict and chaos, and that initiated a new period of our collective evolution, which was a time of consciousness of duality. And we've existed in that awareness of duality for many centuries, many millennia. But we're beginning now in the last century or century and a half or so, we're beginning to come back to a consciousness of oneness. We're realizing how vital it is to our survival to reclaim that consciousness of oneness and to live with that. And so that's the collective process, and that's mirrored on the individual level as well. We go through stages in our own lives, so that we come into some would say that we come into the world as pure souls, and possibly with that consciousness of oneness, but then we're thrust into the world of duality, and we live most of our lives in that world of duality. and it comes a time through our own conscious evolution where we become aware of the unity of reality and the wholeness of reality. So then we start consciously striving toward reclaiming that consciousness of oneness on our own individual level as well. So it's expressing that developmental process on both the personal and the collective levels.
So your personal eternal journey of your soul, right? Your personal one towards the understanding of oneness and the importance of oneness, and then the larger work that you're bringing to the world through the story of our time, I see as a beautiful manifestation of the evolution of your soul's eternal journey. Do you see that also?
Yeah, and when I think about that in terms of my own life, I can only be grateful and thankful and totally appreciative of all of the life experiences I've had that have brought me to this place, including the difficult ones that have taken me through my own personal transformations and all of those. So they're all part of this big picture of who and how I became who I am today, and all of it is I'm totally grateful for all of it, having gotten to this place.
So your best-selling book, The Story of Our Time, which has phenomenal endorsements from the leading spiritual thought leaders of our time, Michael Bernard Beckwith being one of them, Barbara Marx Hubbard being another, again, is receiving tremendous reviews. But share with our audience what they can expect, or what The Story of Our Time really is, what type of book it is, and what it is about.
Yeah, well, I've tried to make it a clear, logical, big picture perspective on the what I think of as the principles, the spiritual principles that are guiding our evolutionary leap right at this moment in time. And so the book is built on 7 principles, and I can quickly go through those if you want me to give a sense of the types of principles that I have found. And these are all drawn from the world's wisdom traditions in one way or another. So the first one would be consciousness is a potentiality set in motion by an organic process. The second one is love is the underlying force of evolution. The third one is justice maintains the inherent balance of life. And the fourth one is unity is the result of the conscious confrontation of opposing forces. And this is the middle chapter that is about the nature of transformation. Then the last 3 chapters and principles are about the nature of reality. The 5th principle is reality is one and global harmony is inevitable. The 6th principle is revelation is continuous and progressive. The 7th principle is consciousness evolves toward wholeness and unity. And then I kind of wrap it all up with an epilogue on the global movement of our time. which I see as the process, the ongoing current process of building a culture of oneness.
So now that you have created this incredible body of work, that's what I think of with the Story of Time, is that it's an incredible body of work, and it is a body of work of service, in service to all of us, to humanity. What do you hope people will receive from reading The Story of Our Time?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think the book, I hope that people will get a greater, deeper, or maybe an abiding sense of the wholeness and purposefulness of creation and our role in making sure that our evolution continues to unfold in the way that the sacred traditions have outlined. So it's really providing some guidelines in terms of principles, patterns, and processes, and also encouraging readers, everyone, to see that it's not a process or pattern that kind of happens in an isolated way on its own. It only happens and will only continue to happen in the way that we want it to happen through our conscious effort, through our action that we take to help make the process unfold the way that we want it to.
So, Robert Atkinson, you are on your soul's eternal journey. What's next for you? What's that you know of, or that you hope for what is next for your eternal journey, your story?
Well, I think I have birthed something here that needs some nurturing, and I'm hoping that I can continue to nurture this book that is meant for the widest of global audiences. I hope I can continue to present it, get it out to as wide an audience as possible, because it's a story that and a process that needs a lot of help for it to happen. So I'm just, I do see my next thing as, so far anyway, as continuing to get this book out to the widest audience as possible through a variety of ways. Talks, workshops, online courses, all those kinds of things. But I do think it's something that needs to be assisted, just as a child, as an infant, needs to be guided and assisted and nurtured in its process to becoming an adolescent when it may go off on its own. The book is still an infant, and I think it's got a lot of nurturing to be done for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And listeners, you can find Robert Atkinson's best-selling book, The Story of Our Time, through Sacred Stories Publishing, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's available worldwide through all e-tailers, all booksellers worldwide. You can also find out more about the other 8 books that Robert Atkinson has written, the beautiful work Robert Atkinson is doing with storytelling and life myth making, and the continuing of the nurturing of the story of our time at his website, robertatkinson.net. Robert, any final words you have for our Sacred Stories audience?
Yeah, there's one thing that I would hope that people who are interested in this and anything that I've said, if it resonates in any way, that one thing people can do is to go to my website, and you'll find a little pop-up called the Oneness Pledge. And that's something that I'm really hoping, encouraging everyone to do, not only to become part of my mailing list, but this is a part of it. It can become part of a daily practice to take this Oneness Pledge and make it part of everyone's daily practice. And the pledge itself is very simple. It says, in all my thoughts and actions, I pledge to look on all things with the eye of oneness. And if we take that to heart and make it a daily, regular practice, we will gradually, eventually, be able to see all things with the eye of oneness. And that'll change the way we interact with everybody and the way we see the world around us.
That's a beautiful pledge, absolutely. And I encourage everyone, the story of Sacred Stories is one of oneness. The story of Robert Atkinson is one of oneness. The story of our time, best-selling book by Robert Atkinson, is one of oneness. So I encourage everyone to visit robertatkinson.net and take the Oneness Pledge. Thank you, Robert, very much for sharing your story and sharing the story of our time with us today.
Thank you, Patricia, for all of your wonderful work.
Listeners, I encourage you to check out not only Robert Atkinson's best-selling book, The Story of Our Time, on our website, sacredstoriesmedia.com, sacredstoriespublishing.com, but all of the other wonderful books and offerings that we have. And subscribe to our podcast, Sacred Stories, on iTunes, and you can also find all of the other shows on our shared Sacred Stories podcast stream at sacredstoriesmedia.net. So until next time, as always, remember to take very good care and to write your sacred story well.